Hello, I'm David Zavadil, the pastor of Eastminster Presbyterian Church in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and this is Reformed Theology from a Recliner. Today we're going to take a quick look at the I in TULIP, irresistible grace, a doctrine that is often misunderstood and misapplied. I want us to start by defining our terms. When we talk of irresistible grace, we're talking about the grace involved in our salvation. It doesn't mean that we can never resist God's grace in other aspects of our life. We know from our own experience that this is not true. Instead, it speaks to the grace that is present upon our regeneration. When we say that God's grace is irresistible, we'd be better to say that it is efficacious or effective in bringing those whom God chooses to salvation. That's what we're looking at, that grace that God gives that leads to salvation. Irresistible grace is the work of God whereby, after choosing to save you and calling you to salvation, does by His grace move in your heart such that you cannot resist His gift of salvation. The doctrine is built upon each of the previous doctrines of the TULIP. Because we are totally depraved, unless God elects to redeem us, we cannot be saved. He provides through Jesus Christ the sacrifice needed to procure our salvation, and now He gives it to His chosen people in such a way that we cannot resist it. In John chapter 6, we read these verses in John 6, 37 and 39, "All that the Father gives me will come to me, and this is the will of Him who sent me, that I should not lose nothing of all that He has given me, but raise it up on the last day." And later in verses 44 and 45, we read, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me." And then at the end of the chapter in verse 65, we read, "No one can come to the Father unless it is granted him by the Father." Jonathan Edwards, writing on this topic of grace, God's irresistible grace, wrote these words. He said, "It is His doing that we must determine the matter. That all that others can do will avail nothing without His agency. This is manifest by such texts as these in Jeremiah 31, 18 and 19. "Turn thou me, and I shall be turned. Thou art the Lord my God. Surely after that I was turned, I repented. And after that I was instructed, I smote upon my thigh." And then in Lamentations 5:21 we read, "Turn thou us unto thee, O Lord, and we shall be turned." R.C. Sproul wrote concerning irresistible grace, "Irresistible grace does not mean that God's grace is incapable of being resisted. Indeed, we are capable of resisting God's grace, and we do resist it. The idea is that God's grace is so powerful that it has the capacity to overcome our natural resistance to it. It is not that the Holy Spirit drags people kicking and screaming to Christ against their wills. The Holy Spirit changes the inclination and the disposition of our wills, so that whereas we were previously unwilling to embrace Christ, now we are willing, and more than willing. Indeed, we aren't dragged to Christ, we run to Christ, and we embrace Him joyfully, because the Spirit has changed our hearts. They are no longer hearts of stone that are impervious to the commands of God and to the invitations of the gospel. God melts the hardness of our hearts when He makes us new creatures." What a great work of God this is, that He moves in us and melts our hearts and gives us the ability, the capacity, and the willingness to receive the gift of salvation through Jesus Christ. Effective, irresistible grace should not be a doctrine we fear, but one that we rejoice in because it demonstrates God's great love for us. It reminds me of that blessed verse in Romans chapter 5, verse 8. "But God demonstrates His own love towards us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." I want to thank you for watching this week. Join me next week as we briefly discuss perseverance of the saints and finish up our look at the TULIP. If you have any questions or topics that you think would make a good video for Reformed Theology from a Recliner, leave a comment below, message me through our Facebook page, or send me an email. Who knows, maybe your comment, your topic, might be our next video on Reformed Theology from a Recliner.